Hello, welcome back. Now, a little bit of a note about the intro music. Unfortunately, we have lost the intro music. I don't know what happened there, but anyway, I could sing like the Ballad of Curtis Lowe or something. Well, I used to wake the morning. We won't do that, but anyway, you don't want to hear me sing. Now, today we're going to try something a little bit different. I'm using a little bit of a different platform here today, and I want to talk about history because I love history. And I hope that some of you like history as well. I'm not going to bore you with history, trust me. Not going to do that. What I would like to do is talk about some strange history, maybe a little bit of interesting artifacts, things that you wouldn't normally think were, out there or that people would want to have in their personal collection or on display. But that's kind of what we're going to do today. So I hope that you enjoy this as much as I do. So let's get started, shall we? The first thing I want to look at here, and then if you are actually watching this video-wise, it doesn't matter. You can listen as well. It will come out the same, but you'll actually get a look at Victoria's wedding cake. This is Queen Victoria of the Victorian age. You know you're important when you have an entire age named after you, right? Victoria was pretty significant in her time frame. Also, her and her husband Alfred basically seeded Europe, for a lack of a better term. World War I, in fact, was kind of a family dispute between Victoria's people, right? Her kids, basically, she married them off in different parts of Europe, and they become very important, and they were running this and running that. They end up having a dispute and end up in a world war, sort of, kind of, in a roundabout way. Anyway, Victoria's wedding cake was saved. They saved a piece of it. You can see it here. In Britain, from my understanding, they use fruitcake type cakes. And if you know anything about fruitcake, if you've ever got one for Christmas or, around the holidays, these things will keep forever. They will survive the apocalypse, I think. A fruitcake would, along with Twinkies and roaches and stuff like that. But anyway, so they saved a piece of this, and someone paid a decent amount of money to have this in their collection, which is wild to me, but they did, right? So they have this. They paid money for it, and they have it. Now, can you eat this? I don't know. I don't know if anybody would try. I know that there are people that do that. They will find old preserved food and then try it. But I don't think anyone has tried this, and they're probably a good idea that they didn't. Now, I will say that the person that bought Victoria's wedding cake, or this piece of her wedding cake, also bought her underwear, knickers, as they call them in Britain. So there you go. That is Victoria's underwear. I don't know why you would want Victoria's underwear, but this person bought them. Paid more money for the underwear than they did the cake. I will say that. Kind of is what it is. I don't think he found these on eBay or anything, but he did buy Victoria's underwear. Now, so since I'm on Victoria's underwear, not that these things have anything to do with each other, but there was this moment in British history in England. It is called the Great Stink. I find this fascinating because London smelled terrible for a while. And you can imagine, they say that, before you're able to have really good sanitation and stuff was pretty nasty. People ask me in class sometimes, where would you want to travel to in history if you could go? And the first thing that I say is I wouldn't want to go anywhere where there wasn't really good antibiotics yet. So until the advent of penicillin or some of these really good antibiotics, I don't want to go because it's pretty nasty pretty much all the way around. And so, same thing in London here. You have this terrible, the Thames is polluted. It has human excrement just floating everywhere. And it's pretty nasty. It's called the Great Stink. Now, Victoria and Alfred actually cleaned that all up. And the Thames is what it is today. So there you go. A little side note of interesting things. Now, presidential hair. Now, of course, I know a whole lot about hair because I have so much, but this is in the Smithsonian. Someone decided to take locks of hair from several presidents and preserve it. Now, hair doesn't degrade as much as other things, so I guess it makes sense to save it, I suppose. I mean, I don't know. You could say it's a little creepy. I know that, some people keep a lock of their kids' hair, or some people used to keep locks of their significant other's hair and different things. You read about these things. But they were able to get locks of presidents' hair, and you can only hope, I guess, that with cloning and all that, one day they can bring some of these guys back. Or not, for that matter. Some of these folks you probably wouldn't want to bring back. You wouldn't probably want to bring Andrew Jackson back. Interesting guy, but he's, yeah. Anyway, we'll get into Andrew Jackson later. Some interesting stories about him that I can totally cover. We don't have enough time for it now. You need a whole podcast for Andrew. Anyway, so they were able to keep this hair. And if, like I mentioned before, if we advance in cloning, I guess theoretically, yeah, we don't want to think about that. I think about Jurassic Park and AI and the Terminator and taking over the world, and technology can go down a pretty terrible, road, I guess. So anyway, if you ever are at the Smithsonian and ask them about their hair, I guess. Now, the next thing, which is, this is probably, of all the things I'm going to talk about today, this is the one that is not Hitler's typewriter. This is the one that's the most interesting. We're going to get to the one that I think is the most interesting in a minute, but it's not Hitler's typewriter, even though Hitler's typewriter is in Bessemer, Alabama right now. There you go. Hitler is a despicable human being. But he always comes up. It's one of those things you can't talk about, history and not mention this goofball. But he did, I guess. There's his typewriter. You had to write that Nazi propaganda with something, and there you go. That's in Bessemer, Alabama. I think the Bessemer Hall of History. You go check it out. It's there right now. But what that leads me to is a much more interesting story, I think. It's one of those things I really, this is fascinating. You could do a whole podcast on this. I don't have really enough time to really do it justice. But there was a lady named Hazel Ferris. And Hazel Ferris was, oh man, this is a really interesting story. She was actually in the Bessemer Hall of History for quite a while. Of course, she had, passed away. She wasn't alive when she was there. But Hazel started out her life in Louisville, Kentucky. She and her husband lived there. According to legend, Hazel really liked to buy stuff. She was, had expensive tastes, and her husband just drove him crazy, and he just couldn't stand it. And finally, she decides one day she's going to buy a hat. And he just lost it. Her husband just lost his mind and went after Hazel, and Hazel decided, I've had enough too, and she killed him. Shot him dead, graveyard dead. So after she murdered her husband, the police came, 3 or 4 police, depending on which story that you read, and she killed all of them. she just went on a rampage and killed all these people. It's not funny, but I mean, you'll see why it could be a little bit comical later. So she gets her middle finger shot off in this whole back and forth with the police. So her middle finger is shot off, gone. But she escapes. She gets away, and she flees, of course, like anybody was, to the great state of Alabama. She leaves Louisville, Kentucky, goes to Alabama, ends up in Bessemer, and she continues to live her life. The stories go she married a police officer potentially there. She could have been involved in some late night type activities. Maybe she ran a house of ill repute, as story goes. But long story short, she ends up dead, murdered. Oh no. So, what's good for the goose, I guess. So she ends up dead, and she ends up in a furniture store where they're going to have I guess, like a funeral service for her. But they discover that her body is not decomposing like normal bodies do, and she's kind of preserved really well. So she becomes a mummy. And then the interesting story begins. She travels basically the world. They charge money for people to come in to see Hazel. And so she is an attraction, like this morbid roadside attraction that people go see. So she makes her rounds all around the world and this and that. This is what she looked like if you're watching on the video. Right there, that's Hazel. She was, according to the story, the only human mummy at that time in the world today. And there she was. People paid money. Now, she ended up, after traveling the world as this attraction, she ended up back in Bessemer and ended up in their history museum there in Bessemer. So there you go. So she was there up until like 2002 or so. She was there, and people would pay money to see her. But eventually, they did return her remains. They had her cremated, I believe, around 2002 or so. So she is no longer there, from my understanding. But you can still see Hitler's typewriter if you want to. I would rather see Hazel, honestly. So there you go. Now, what else do we have here? We have the original London Bridge. It's in London, right? No, it's in Arizona. There you go. The original London Bridge, it did fall down, as the story goes, or it was taken down, and it was purchased by a person in Arizona. So you can go to Havasu City, Arizona today, right? And you can see the original London Bridge. So, I'll tell you, I think of Arizona. I think of, standing on a corner in Winslow, Arizona. It's such a fine sight to see. A girl, my lord, in a flatbed Ford, slowing down to take a look at me. It's all about taking it easy, I guess. There you go. The original London Bridge in Arizona, if you're ever in town there. So something else we have, very interesting, the Titanic menus. So you got first class, second class, third class. Now you can see a huge difference here between these different classes and what they were eating. And they have, several examples of these, but some of them did survive, or they were able to have them, and they've purchased the actual ones that were like on the boat before it went down. So you can see kind of the things, the fancy stuff that the first class was eating before they, sunk to the bottom of the ocean, right? But what I find, because I would have probably been over here on this third class menu here. Look at this here, third class. They have oatmeal porridge and milk, smoked herrings for breakfast, and jacket potatoes, ham and eggs, fresh bread and butter, marmalade. That would be good. Swedish bread. I wonder what that is. Tea and coffee. And for dinner, rice soup. That's amazing. Sounds so good. Now dinner is different, because dinner was like lunch, I think, and supper was dinner or something like that. That's how it. Roast beef, brown gravy, sweet corn, boiled potatoes, plum pudding, sweet sauce, fruit, tea, cold meat. Who doesn't want some cold meat, cheese, and pickles? Fresh bread and butter, stewed figs and rice and tea. And then for supper, you had gruel. Who doesn't want some gruel and cabin biscuits and cheese? So there you go. That was the wonderful thing for third class, which probably would have been where I would have been, down in steerage. Now I will say this. The other day, speaking of Titanic, I was watching the Netflix show on the submersible that went down and blew up, right? And that tells me yet again that there is no way I would ever want to get in a submarine. That is just horrifying to me, that the things that happen to those folks. Anyway, so there you go. You have some interesting things with the menus for Titanic. So that's the kind of things. You got a little gruel before you went down and ended it all, I guess, in the bottom of the ocean. So, all right. So one last thing before we go. The Craven Street Bones. What is that? And what is Craven Street? Well, we're going back to London town for this because that's where Craven Street is. And they had excavated a site around Craven Street, and they found all these bones of bodies, kids, and there were kids there were adults, there were all these things like they've been dissected. It was just this really interesting site that they found. Well, as things would happen, the person that lived in that house was one Benjamin Franklin. He's on the $100 bill, the electricity, Benjamin Franklin, that whole dude, so it's a very interesting thing. So Benjamin Franklin lived in this house or owned this home, and all these bodies are found underneath. So was he a serial killer? No, he wasn't. He probably, in all likelihood, the house was rented by learned doctors and things, and to be able to learn about human anatomy and different things back in the day, what they did was they had to experiment on actual bodies to figure things out. However, at that time, people frowned on this. I mean, they didn't like it at all, and you can't do that. That's really bad. So they said, it was sort of, you had to sneak around to do it. So that is likely what this was. There were experiments going on, medical experiments and research and things along those lines, and that's where this goes to. So Benjamin Franklin wasn't a serial killer, probably. I will tell you an interesting little side note about Franklin. Of course, we know he was minister to France, and actually was able to get the French to help us during the American Revolution. And without Franklin doing this, I mean, that's a huge part of it, because with the French helping the colonies at that time, it does totally, assist us in winning. And we may not have won without the French. Maybe, it's one of those things. However, Franklin was there, and people loved Franklin in France. They absolutely loved him. They thought he was a celebrity. The women loved him. The men loved him. Everybody loved Franklin. He was like the Brad Pitt of the day, I guess. So he played it up. He used to wear the coonskin cap, and he would, go around like this, rustic kind of guy. So people loved him. Now, who didn't love him was Louis XVI. Louis XVI was very jealous of Franklin. He didn't like it. He didn't like the fact that he got so much attention and Louis didn't. So Louis got a little bit upset, and the way that reportedly, now they have evidence of this, which is fascinating to me, the way that Louis was able to get back at Franklin for taking attention away from him was that he had a chamber pot. That's the way they used to, go to the bathroom back in those, times. Chamber pot, use the chamber pot. A lot of times I just threw it out the window, which gets back to the whole great stink idea I was talking about earlier. Anyway, so he decides he's going to put a image of Franklin, right, a representation of him on the bottom of his chamber pot. So every morning he can get up and do his business on Franklin. Isn't that wonderful? Check that out. So he gets to get up every morning and do his thing right there on Franklin, and it made him feel better. So anyway, so there you go. That's a little Benjamin Franklin story. Now, while I'm on Scalp, see, this is a skull here, right? So while I'm on bones, I do want to mention one of my favorite things that you can't see it anymore, but it used to be on display, or at least you could see it if you were in the Himalayas, right? Was a Yeti scalp and supposed a Yeti hand or paw. I don't know. Does a Yeti have a paw? This is the a version of Bigfoot. We have Bigfoot here, Bigfoot, skunk ape, they call them, wood booger, all the different things that they call Yeti over there, the abominable snowman. So allegedly, this was in a monastery, I believe, so somewhere in the Himalayas. Maybe someone had it in their home. It was kind of almost like a mascot of the area. So they loved this thing. This was supposedly a scalp of a Yeti, and it was very important to the people that lived there. Well, Sir Edmund Hillary, everybody's heard of Sir Edmund of Everest fame, decides that he's going to take this scalp and get it tested, right? So he's definitely going to, take care of this. So he makes a deal with these people, and he takes this scalp. And he's going to make sure that this isn't actually a Yeti. And I don't know how you do that exactly, but they tried. And allegedly, this is not a Yeti, so you can rest easy as far as that goes. But then he took it back, and of course now they've hid this thing. They're like, we can't trust these people coming over here taking our stuff, so they've put it away. They've locked this away, so you can't really go and look at it anymore. So that's unfortunate. But at one time, it was probably a Yeti scalp that you could look at. Well, I mean, maybe not a Yeti scalp. It would be cool if it was, because I'm a fan personally of Bigfoot. I think it would be wonderful if a hairy man beast was running around the forests of North America, right? Makes sense to me. He probably is pretty well adept of hiding and getting away, so you never know. It's like aliens, man, They got to be out there somewhere, don't they? So we'll talk about that later. Anyway, that's a little bit of a history hit, so to speak, for today. A little bit different than normal, but hopefully you found something fun in that. We'll do this a little bit here and there. I do really enjoy talking about history. It's what I do. They actually pay me to do that, which is, I would do it for free. Don't tell anybody. That's a secret. But I would do it for free. I absolutely love it. So we'll come up with some other interesting things, and we'll talk about it next time. So I hope everyone has a fantastic day. Thank you for listening.